start. So karakia. Ko rehi nui e tu I one. Whakatu anaku e takoto ake. Arahina mai mātou, I roto I o korua, korowai, aroha. Mō ake tonu, tihei, moriora. Tēnā koutou katoa, e hu he mai nei ki te toto koutou kopapa o te rā. E hu e minu tēnei, tēnā koutou, ko Natasha ahau, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So welcome to the first Masterclass of PowerUp for Impact Enterprises, and I'll just stop here and hand over to Zara to do the work.
Cool. So, as I mentioned, I'm Zara from Startup Taranaki. This is the Startup Taranaki crew. We've also got Tanya with us this evening, who's a pseudo member of the crew, but an expert in theory of change, which is the model that we're going to be using tonight. So please do draw on us as you need and want to this evening. We're really, really excited about tonight's topic and being your guide to hopefully have you walking away with an understanding of what impact modelling is, why it is important for impact enterprises. Secondly, your first version of an impact model. It might look a bit shabby, it might look a bit unrefined, but you will walk away with a first version, which is the bedrock of understanding the impact that you're trying to make and moving towards creating that impact in meaningful ways. Thirdly, you'll walk away with some next steps and some really useful resources, some really timely resources. The government has just released some of their resources. Arkina's resources is what we're using this evening as well. So you will definitely walk away with those two things. We also hope to cover off what impact measurement looks like for those of you that are interested in that. And we'll do a bit of a coaching scenario where I get one of you to walk me through your very first impact model, and we'll bounce into impact indicators and what they are, what they look like and feel like in reality. So there is a lot to cover. I'm not going to apologise for talking quickly, but I am going to ask you to be engaged, energised by us, from one another. Let's bounce off each other. Let's really use the people around you. You all have your respective knowledge to share and to offer one another. And that's the really cool thing about this journey. There's so much expertise and wisdom in the room. We're just looking to harvest that and hone in on how we can become better at doing good for our community, for our environment. So that's what you're going to be walking away with. There are obviously other masterclasses. We'll go over those at the end of the session as well. In our recap, it was great to see the spectrum mentioned. So the spectrum of impact enterprise and what that actually looks like. What are we talking about as impact enterprise? We're talking about that space between business purely for profit and charities who are completely reliant on funding. Impact enterprise is everything in between. So you may be a charity that wants to diversify your income. You may be a business that wants to deliver social or environmental or cultural outcomes. You are absolutely welcome here, and we're excited to be on the journey with you and see what ideas you've got brewing. So there are two ingredients for an impact enterprise to succeed and create long-term sustainable change, and that is a business model, aka a revenue model. How will you make money? And secondly, an impact model, which is our focus this evening. What is the long-term change that you're looking to create? And what are the steps that will lead to that change? If you get those two things right, you will create sustainable long-term change. And we believe that this is going to be the new normal for business. So we're really excited that there's a growing community here in Taranaki, started by you guys, which is awesome. You might think, why on earth spend time 2 hours on a sunny evening with us? Let me tell you why. I work with numerous organisations to develop their impact model with them, and I hear the same things again and again and again. If you are able to create a meaningful impact model, it will enable you to plan better, aka to say yes to the right opportunities and to say no to the ones that are not on purpose or on mission for you. It becomes your compass for decision making. It's a really, really, it's an alive document. It should be revisited again and again and again. And if you do that, it will help you plan. Secondly, it will help you prove that you're actually making the difference you thought you were trying to make. Thirdly, it will help you improve. You know, customer feedback, stakeholder feedback should inform your practice to enable you to maximise the impact that you're making and tune into what it is that's working for those that you're looking to serve most. Fourthly, measurement. You know, it's one thing to ask what change or what difference are we making out there. It's another thing to say, how much change are we helping create? Measurement. And fifthly, communication. We will do a whole masterclass on this, how this becomes a communication piece for you and your enterprise to your various stakeholders, be that investors, funders, customers. There are many, many audiences that will be interested in your impact model. So if you're able to speak really clearly about what your impact is and how you're achieving that impact, it'll be incredibly compelling and it will enable you to operate with integrity. So really, really communication important tool. Awesome. That's why you should do it. I think ultimately it boils down to this question. How do you know you're making an impact that you want to make if you don't know what you're aiming for? And that is essentially what we're trying to help you get out of tonight. We're trying to help you understand the long-term impact you're seeking to make in really clear terms and the steps that will be needed along the way, aka the outcomes needed along the way to get there. I work primarily with funders, so primarily at the moment I'm working with the Toy Foundation. I am seeing this huge shift in focus, not only from Toy Foundation, but from many other investors, stakeholders, where it's no longer about the output of what you're doing, aka what your activity or product or service is, and the numbers and things that you can count from that. It's actually about what changes because of the activity that you're doing. So a couple of examples here from Social Ventures Australia. You know, if I was going to an investor or a funder and saying, I'm going to train lots of guide dogs, they're now going to start to ask me, well, so what? Why does that matter? I need to be able to talk about what changes because there's guide dogs in the house of somebody that is visually impaired. So I need to be able to explain that actually people with low vision have more independence because of these guide dogs. We're shifting the focus from activity to outcomes. Really, really subtle but important shift. So a lot of what I'll talk about tonight and a lot of what you guys will be workshopping is actually what are the outcomes that I'm working towards. Theory of change. Logic model, theory of change, impact model, they're all the same thing, okay? Don't walk away confused, they're interchangeable terms. So theory of change was popularised in the 1990s. It has remained the foundational piece to impact measurement, to anything in this space. It is such a well-used, robust tool. So if you can get your heads around it tonight, you're walking away with something really valuable in itself. What does a theory of change or impact model include? So these are the key ingredients, but essentially a theory of change or logic model or impact model includes a description of the situation, aka the problem that you're looking to solve. The activity, so the approach that you're taking to solve that problem, be that a description of the product, program or service that you're creating. The output, so what happens immediately from your activity. So it might be, right, I am running workshops to train teachers. Okay, I've trained 10 teachers. That would be a description of the output. The outcome is the result from that output. So it's what changes in that person's life because of them coming to my workshop. Impact is an accumulation of all the outcomes that occur that result in long-term change for that person. So these are the ingredients. Don't worry, I'm going to go into them in a lot more detail, but these are the ingredients of a logic model or impact model. And then there's this set of arrows. These are our connectors. This is the logic. This is how we show the relationship between outcomes and activities.
Theory of change in terms of the how it's visually represented can be entirely different. So yours doesn't have to look like this at all. But what was interesting about Job Hop and their activity, I suppose, is it impacts two different people, two different actors, as you will. So you've got the job providers down here. So this is the theory of change for a job provider, or how Job Hop interacts with the job provider to create impact. And then the job hopper, somebody seeking the work. So we explored those with them, obviously looking at the short, medium and long-term ones, and then concluding in here a more inclusive economy. And we also sort of found key ones that were really relevant, that were almost like milestones, I suppose, that they could look back or at least ensure that they were hitting all the time. So in this instance for the job hopper, it's increased work and income, which can lead sort of through various ways to improved mental health, gains of work history, obviously then ultimately leading to increased family resilience and a more inclusive economy. For the job provider, similar sort of pathway, increased capacity, confidence, stronger relationships, trusted workforce, more resilient business, and then a more inclusive economy. So it was quite linear, but it was quite interesting to us that it sort of had these two pathways that we chose to break out in this manner.
But you can see all the ingredients there, right? So we've got the people involved, the outputs, short, medium, long outcomes, and then ultimate impact, and then the logic of that journey respective to the person involved. So this is another theory of change that we helped Bishop's Action Foundation. Has anybody heard of Bishop's Action Foundation? Cool. So you might remember Marcia, who was with us at the launch. She is the manager of Wheelhouse. Wheelhouse was a project that came out of support from Bishop's Action Foundation. So they essentially are a catalyst for change. They support change makers to launch ideas that challenge inequity. So we spent a lot of time understanding what it was that they did, so research, advocacy, partnerships, and supporting practical action. The output was lots of evidence-based knowledge is shared through their research, trusted partnerships are formed, and ideas become action being the output, and then the short, medium, long-term change and how that leads to ultimately the impact that they're looking to create being reduced inequity. So you can see how it's a different shape, it takes a different path, but all the ingredients are there. A lot of what goes into tonight in terms of developing your theory of change is an understanding of outcomes, okay? I realise that I'm firing a lot at you, but if you take nothing else away with you other than this, perfect. Outcomes. Outcomes are changes that stakeholders experience as a result of your activity. Can somebody else read that out for us again slowly?
I don't mind talking. Outcomes are changes that stakeholders experience as a result of your activity.
Outcomes are essentially results. They can be positive, which obviously we want to aim for. They can also be negative. They can be unintentional, or they can be intentional. It's really important to acknowledge that whole space. Outcomes are results. Okay, what do they look and feel like in reality? If I've run a program on mentoring and I've trained up a heap of mentors and they come back to me and say, I feel like I know where I can get help from now. That is an outcome in that person's life. That's what it looks and feels like in reality. Rangatahi are becoming more confident in who they are. They're connecting with new friends. These are all outcomes. You'll see that I've bolded some words on there. The more we move down that slide, the more concise we get with actually describing the change that's happening for someone. Improved engagement at school, strengthened whānau relationships, less stress at home, improved financial security. We can say a lot with 4 words. I want you to really think about this as we move into the workshopping stage. I'll jump back to this slide because it is so crucial. How we frame up an outcome in outcomes language, it looks like this. There's always a change word present. So whether it's an improvement, whether it's a reduction, whether it's a strengthening, whether it's an increase in volume, that change word is really crucial in describing really quickly what's changing in somebody's life or in the environment. More biodiversity. Those two words tell me a lot. So that's what they look and feel like in reality. Okay. So moving through, we're going to talk about your activity. What is your idea or your product or service that will help solve this problem? So just keep this pretty high level. You're looking for, we're a small urban farm who are seeking to ... Really high level, really clear terms. Anybody should be able to pick up your theory of change and understand it. Okay, so describe your activity and then the outputs. So these are the next two boxes on your canvas. Activity and outputs. Output is essentially what happens immediately because of your activity. It's often something that's really easy to count. So I trained 14 teachers. I grow food on 3 hectares of land. It's the immediate thing that happens next because of your activity, okay? Outcomes that you're trying to create. Remembering outcomes are results. They're the change that your stakeholders experience because of your activity. So constantly in the back of your mind, you're asking, what changes in the environment or the people that I'm working with because of what I'm up to? So what's changing? I've got another question to edge you into that refining space now, and that is, what else changes? And why does that matter? Those two questions should help you develop more outcomes, and then we're going to refine and cull and clarify. But for now, what else changes? Why does that matter? Get more post-it notes down which describe your outcomes in really clear terms. Less, more, increased, strengthened, ... Cool. Explore those. What I want to invite you to do now is actually start to theme your outcomes onto your canvas. So the first thing to think about is this a short-term outcome? Is this a medium-term outcome? Or is this a longer term outcome? And by that I mean, is it going to happen really quickly, quite immediately, once someone engages with my product or service or my activity? Or is it going to happen further down the track? Okay? And feel free to get rid of outcomes if they feel irrelevant. So this is now us moving into theming and refining. So where does it sit on short, medium, long? And can you refine your outcomes in any way? Can it be rephrased to be clearer? Next invitation is really to think about what is the logical order that these should sit in? How are outcomes connected? So if I am running a mentoring training session and 20 mentors come and get trained by me, they walk away more confident, more capable, more connected. The logic will be that they're immediately more connected because they've met a bunch of people that are also mentors. They are more capable because I've given them tools. The on-flow from that is that their confidence increases to use those mentoring skills. So think about the order in which outcomes will occur and the connection between them. So ask yourself, what is the ultimate impact that I'm looking to make? Is there one ultimate outcome that you're looking to achieve? And if so, name it. Get it on a post-it note. What is the ultimate impact? If all of these outcomes occur, what is it that changes ultimately? This is where you bring in your unique lens on that ultimate impact. A little bit of poetry that describes impact in a way that resonates for you. So when organizations look to measure their impact, The first thing that we do with them is develop a theory of change that's not only informed by them, it's tested by their stakeholders, it's informed by their stakeholders, and it becomes a document, a living document that gets revisited, reiterated constantly, because it should be informed by the change that's actually happening for those that you're working with or the environment. In terms of measuring that impact, the thing that we need to do is identify the key outcomes on that theory of change. So where are we seeing the most connections between outcomes? Once we've identified those key outcomes, what we do is develop indicators. Has anybody come across that term before, indicators? It's essentially a way in which we know that change is happening. And remember, that change might be positive or negative. What I say to organisations is that indicators they're like big fat signposts. An outcome is the result. An indicator is a signpost that says, hey, look, there's change happening. Here's how we know. Okay, so outcomes, results, indicators, signposts. Okay, well, I felt like a bit of like an air hostess then. What do they look and feel like in reality? They can look really different. It is really important that your indicators are relevant to what you're trying to measure and relevant to only your organisation. So if I suddenly notice that Araha has joined the school rugby team, what might that be an indicator of?
Increased physical health.
Yes.
She's developed more confidence.
Yeah, perfect. Great examples. Increased confidence, increased physical health. If Bobby tells me that they feel more confident, what is that an indicator of? Increased confidence. Sometimes indicators are really explicit and they're really obvious and they stare us in the face. And sometimes we overcomplicate this world of indicators. Actually, it can be as simple as somebody telling you their story, what has changed in their life. That is an absolutely valid indicator, primary evidence. If I notice that somebody's going to the doctors less, they've joined the school rugby team, and their whānau are suddenly going swimming together, what I'm starting to do is pick up little puzzle pieces of indicators that create a much more holistic picture of what's going on. It's really important with indicators that you have 3 or 4 per outcome. They're puzzle pieces. They're no good on their own. They only tell you one camera lens. You need 3 or 4 of them to understand a more holistic picture of what's going on for that person or the environment. So, characteristics of a good set of indicators will be, there'll be a mix of narrative, so somebody telling you what's changed, and a mix of qualitative data that you can draw on. So if I can measure the levels of nitrogen in my compost, that's a data point. If I can track how often someone is using the bus all of a sudden, that's a quantitative thing. Okay, so there's that mix of subjective and objective that needs to be combined in your indicator list for an outcome. Let me just check myself. So they're subjective and objective. They're a mix of stuff that you can kind of measure and track easily, combined with story and narrative. They are puzzle pieces, so they're no good on their own. You need 3 or 4 to really paint a picture of what's going on accurately. And the other thing that I would say to everybody that I work with on this stuff is actually they need to be really relevant for you, but also within your own resources to track. There is no good spending a heap of time developing indicators that you just do not have the time or money to track. So use what's within your means. Start small on this stuff. It can, as I say, get really academic, really overcomplicated. But if you start with case studies and some data points that support those case studies, you're onto a winner. This can grow over time in complexity. Start small. I often will make just an Excel. It'll look like a table. In fact, I'll show you once we've worked through. It'll look like this. So I'll just have the outcome. I'll have 3 or 4 indicators here, and I'll start thinking about how, when, who. How will I actually measure that and track that? Will it be a survey? How frequently will that survey go out? And where will I keep that data? That sort of thing. Example.
The one thing I would say, just, you know, like, just in the process, because I do a lot of strategy and planning, and you know, what we're inviting you to do is actually make a lot of assumptions, make a lot of projections, imagine into the future, and paint a picture of what that might look like. So these will remain assumptions until you discover that they are factual.
Yep.
So the question you're asking yourself in this process is, how would I know that that had happened? And if you don't have a way of measuring it, it remains an assumption.
Yeah. You know, I've worked with organisations, Big Brothers Big Sisters, for example. They were measuring so much stuff, it was unreal. Their reports were like 96 pages. They come to a funder, and the funder's like, I'm overwhelmed. What are they actually achieving? You reduce that and you refine that, and you look at your key outcomes, and you create cohesion around the stories that you tell that relate to that. All of a sudden, the funder's like, oh, I know what this organisation does. They increase confidence, they increase connectedness, whatever it might be. It's as much as a storytelling piece as it is a planning piece. And you're right, is it chicken or egg? Am I dictating the outcomes? That's why I say, and that's why Dan mentioned just then, it's actually theory until you test it. What are the people you're working with telling you is most important to them? What are they telling you is changing in their lives? And how do you tune into that then informs your theory of change? Cool, we have covered so much tonight, honestly. I wouldn't normally rush through that amount in the time that we've had. We will send out the slides to all of you. Just a bit of a reminder. You're so invited to use this video ask to journal and reflect on your learning. I have no doubt that that will just cement some of your own learning. So the video link that went out yesterday will come out again with these slides. Take the 5 minutes, respond to those questions. What further insight does that encourage? There in the slides, there's a link. So there will be a copy of the impact modelling canvas. So if you want to go and print it out again, work through it again, fantastic. There's also a guide on how to use that canvas step by step, so that without us in the room, you can equally get through it as successfully as you have tonight. Doing Good for Business, business.gov.nz have just released a heap of resources for this impact space, which is really, really exciting. And I think that's an indicator actually that this is mainstream now. Purposeful profit is the new norm. It is happening, which is fantastic. So do check that out. And right here, I've got an indicator canvas, as well as a guide on how to. So it just kind of bulks out the detail on the very quick living example that we worked through there, and gives you another template to work through. If you want to have a stab at starting this journey on measurement yourself, great. If it feels too hard yards to do it by yourself, please reach out. We offer something through Startup Taranaki called Office Hours. Graham, can you tell us about Office Hours in 2 sentences? Why would you come? When are they? How do they book in? What's happening next? We've already sort of alluded to the fact that this is theory. This is all assumptions. You need to do some homework, okay? Or you're invited to do some homework. Go out and validate this theory of change. Get your stakeholders to inform what it is that's on your piece of paper, because ultimately it is them that will inform this most accurately. Refine it from there. Use the recommended resources, attend the next masterclass, reach out for an office hour if you want some one-to-one coaching.